Hi everyone, Jordan Spangenburg here, ACTE 699, and the data analysis and collection method that I chose to review was the teacher-created assessments. So first of all, the description with teacher-created assessments, really two questions that we want to make sure we're answering. The first one here is validity, and with validity, we always want to make sure we're answering the question, did we actually measure what we intended to measure? So specifically then with the assessment that teachers have created and are giving to their classes, you can personalize it more in saying, does the assessment measure student mastery on the content and objectives of the chapter and unit? Second question then would be reliability. We want to make sure that the tests that we are giving year in and year out, are we getting similar and consistent results each time the assessment is given? So the first one there with validity, we want to make sure that the questions that we are adding to the assessments that we're creating, the assessments that we're giving to our students, we want to make sure that we are asking them to master questions from the content that was taught. So we should not really be throwing in any questions that were not part of the current unit, questions that did not have anything to do with the objectives of the unit. We want to make sure it's specifically looking at just what we taught our kids and what we want them to master. And then with the reliability, as I already said, year in and year out, are we getting similar results on the assessment? Is it reliable? Which the results should be pretty similar year in and year out, despite the differences that you might have in your classes. Some years you might have, higher achieving kiddos. Some years they might be lower, but ultimately still the results should be reliable. So teacher-created assessments, this is a quantitative data analysis measure. And, when we make these assessments and give them to our students, we're really creating them and using them. It should be guiding and adjusting our instruction. So especially with our formative assessments, we need to see how students are scoring. If there's common questions that they're all missing or common questions that they're all getting correct, that should really guide our instruction and, help us focus as teachers on what we're teaching. And then at the very end, if you're giving a summative assessment, then hopefully that is showing student mastery by the time you have given those formative assessments and adjusted your instruction so students can show their mastery. So teacher-created assessments are used oftentimes in the reading. We read that districts will adapt rather than adopt commercial curriculum. So we can't always rely on the textbook unit tests that are given as a valid measurement. If we're only adapting and using some pieces rather than adopting the entire thing, well, then we can't expect that the test then is going to be a valid test, so we use a teacher-created assessment instead. Common assessments then, I know there's districts around the area that use those. My district is one as well. But common assessments really keep us accountable, at the district level. So I teach 5th grade, for example, and we give common math assessments. And so every single 5th grader does take the same exact test at the end of every single math unit. And then finally, of course, with this, the goal is to answer the question, did students master the skills of the current chapter? So in other words, the tests that we created and that we're giving to our 5th grade math students, are we assessing them on mastery of skills in the chapter that we just taught? So some strengths of teacher-created assessments. First of all, the data gathered from the teacher-created assessment does provide us as teachers information on how well our students are doing. So in other words, especially with those formative assessments, we really get to see, are students mastering the content as we're going through it, or do we need to stop and maybe go back and reteach and then do some reassessing? The goal would then be to have everything ready to go for when we give that end of unit common summative assessment. The second strength here is, we as teachers, we can format the questions to our desire. So again, with our common assessments, we can word them in a way that is similar to what the students are seeing in the text, or similar to what students may be seeing on standardized tests and PSSA testing that they'll take in the spring. And that leads me to my third strength there is, again, the questions can be formatted to mirror standardized test questions. And in fact, when we made these 5th grade common assessments a couple years ago, that was the goal when we created the questions, in that they are worded and formatted in a way similar to what students will be seeing on PSSA testing. So again, not that standardized testing is the end all and be all of everything, but at the same time, if we can be helping our students to see questions similar to what they might see on the PSSA, especially the way that they're worded. They can be used to that, so that way when they take those standardized testing in the spring, the questions don't appear as ambiguous or confusing as some of the questions can be. Some negatives there with teacher-created assessments. Sometimes if we create our own assessments and know exactly what they say, we end up teaching to the tests just so our students do well in the common summative assessment. And sometimes, we as teachers can get lost in that, and we don't really provide a whole lot of time for student inquiry, student research. So we need to make sure that if we are using teacher-created common assessments, that's fine, but we still need to make sure we're giving our students time to explore, do further research, do some more digging, asking questions and answering related topic questions, even if it's not exactly what is on a teacher-created assessment, or if it's not exactly what was on the current unit. We want to make sure that we're still, allowing students to dive into that creativity piece and just be able to do some research and just, finding out more information about what we're looking at. Finally, some concerns. So this has been talked about over the past couple of years, especially at my district with the teacher-created math assessments, is oftentimes the questions that are created, they're created in a way that allows our smart students, I have that in quotes, to succeed. So again, a lot of the questions on our summative assessments that we use for math are challenging, and our higher achieving students tend to do well, but our middle and especially then our low-level students, they tend to really struggle on these tests. So that's always a big concern that I've had. Are the tests set up in a way that students are going to be able to succeed, or are we going to have a lot of students just, feel like a failure before they've even started? And the other thing then that we've looked at here with these teacher-created common assessments, the open-ended piece. So each open-ended question that we give does have a rubric for full credit, partial credit, or no credit, and there is some criteria, but still some of that can be, subjective to the grader. So it's really hard for that, especially in the open-ended piece, to get fair grading, if you will, because, it depends on the teacher. So now part of the test the students do take is multiple choice, which again, multiple choice, we shouldn't have just one type of question, but at the same time, with multiple choice, there's a right answer, there's a wrong answer. There's really no subjectivity there. It's all, did you get it or didn't you get it? So that's another thing that we need to be continually think about as we're using teacher-created common assessments. We need to make sure that, as graders, we are following the rubric and trying to be as objective as possible when we're giving students scores. So overall, that's a look into teacher-created common assessments, how they can be used, some of their strengths and weaknesses, and just some concerns to consider moving forward.